Create that life, legacy designers. Amber Prosia here. Welcome to episode number 17 of the Parenting Biz Podcast, coming to you every Monday. Let's chat with this week's featured guest, Heather Rolls. Heather, are you ready to flourish us on your journey of how you design the life you've always wanted for yourself and your family?
Heck yes.
Amazing. Heather is the owner of Chelsea and Rose Flowers and Events. She has her own flower shop and specializes in corporate events and weddings. Chelsea and Rose Flowers transforms events around the Gold Coast and Brisbane into experiences and unforgettable moments that entertain, communicate, and inspire. She's originally from Canada, which is always nice to have a fellow Canuck on the show, so thanks for joining us. And her husband, she has a husband and a beautiful 4-year-old daughter as well. So Heather, please take a minute and fill in any gaps from that intro and give us a little glimpse of your own personal life.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Amber. It's nice to always talk to another Canadian as well. As you know, it's hard sometimes being in another country with no family, etc. It's nice to hear the accent. So, so I'm the owner of a event styling and management company along with a flower shop. I've been in Australia. It will be 5 years October. So I'm a permanent resident. It took a while to get here, but here we are. Recently moved to the Gold Coast and loving it. And looking at really settling down now in Australia and making this our home.
Fantastic. Congratulations on the PR, because I definitely understand that journey. It's a huge accomplishment. One more step to citizenship.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Yeah. I know. I can do that next year, September. So that's my next step.
Phenomenal. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us, Heather. We can't wait to dive in and get some of your expertise for today. But
Perfect.
As you are aware, our listeners are parents-to-be, that realize ownership is key to not only to our parenting or business, but in life in general. And along that parenting journey, we can lose sight of that. However, if we focus on life as a game or a sport or an activity, not only can we learn to let go easier, but we can also gain strength from our mistakes and design our core focus to be one of laughter, joy, and most importantly, having fun. Just like a 5-year-old kid in the sandbox. So this week, yeah, it's cute, isn't it? So this week, our entire interview will be crafted around the Stanley Cup Playoffs. So for our listeners who aren't aware of what the Stanley Cup Playoffs are, the Stanley Cup Playoffs is an elimination tournament in the National Hockey League, also known as the NHL, consisting of 4 rounds of best-of-7 series. There's 8 teams from each of the 2 conferences that qualify for the playoffs based on their regular season point total. So this round will be all about flourishing between games. Now, as you guys are all aware, this is just an analogy, and we can create and design our lives any way we want. Heather, this was your chosen sport, so please take us through your daily routine and how you make it work with your life and expertise. All right. So
wow.
Where to begin? Let's begin with season points, because depending obviously on your total points for the season, you may or may not be qualified for the playoffs. And and this is the same within business. Depending on how much value you're giving to people, customers may not show up that year. What have you found to be the most consistent way of gaining new clients and keeping existing ones?
That's a tough one. I find here it's all about a relationship sale. So you're not selling necessarily your product. And for me, having both a service and a product-based business, I find that the more you connect with people on a level, they're buying you. They're not buying necessarily my flowers. Anyone can make them a bouquet. Let's be honest. There's a lot of flowers around there. But in order to make them come back for more and keep coming to me and possibly then hire me for, say, their corporate gig or their wedding, I find that it's super important for them to get to know me as a person and know that I'm there as a support for that actual event and not just getting rid of a product and moving on to the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually even Zig Ziglar, he says, so if you don't know Zig Ziglar, one of the greatest sales people out there, he's like, you don't actually build a business, you build people, and the people build your business.
That's right.
And it's all about
100%.
Relationships, and it's about giving value and not expecting or taking in return. It's all about the
That's
give.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did mention about starting here in Australia because you are originally from Canada. Has it been a struggle starting a business in a foreign country for you, or did you just have the mindset of, well, let's just go with it, this is where I am, and it would be the same struggle even if it was in Canada?
You know what? I did have a business in Canada. I had a flower shop in Canada. I had a flower shop there for about 7 years. And then I went and married a man, and that all life came into it, and I ended up here in Australia. So I find starting a business in Australia has been harder. There is really a cultural difference between Australians and Canadians, especially in the business world, I find. Now, I don't want to I don't want to pinpoint anyone, do anything like that, but it is really, Australians are very relationship based. So it's who you know. Whereas back home, I could just sell my service and my product, and as long as the product was good, they would buy it. Whereas here, they really do want to know who you are. What made it difficult for me was coming into the country and really not having any family or not having any base to grow from. So I really had to get out there and network and meet people and let them get to know me in order just to get my name out there. So that's probably been the most difficult thing for me, being in the foreign country and doing that. But people love my accent as well, so that helps.
There's a bonus.
There's a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with starting the business over here too, but also having your daughter here as well.
That's right.
Right? So you would have had that, and then not having that support. And then on top of that, not even aside from the business, but even understanding what is offered here in Australia, like daycare services or
Absolutely.
programs or meeting new moms and all that other stuff too. So it probably was quite a bit of a learning curve for you, would you say the least?
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a learning curve. And especially, I mean, having a child anyways is an emotional and stressful time. Sorry, Amber, it's stressful. It's going to be wonderful. And it's especially hard when you don't have that support system. So, I mean, for a little bit, I was toying with the idea, I'm just going to go back to work. I'll do the 9 to 5. I'm there for my child. But then I realized, you know what? I'm not happy doing that. And my child deserves the happiest mother. And the happiest mother in my world is someone who's creating and being creative and doing it for herself. So I think that's where my mindset had to go around being, you know what, I'm doing this. It's going to work because there isn't another option for me.
Yeah.
And it is. And you just have to look at what's the best for my family, what's the best for me. And basically, a happy child has a happy mother.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that brings us great into first period, because that's about getting into the game. And game 1 has begun in the playoffs, and our first period clock has begun counting down, which I'm sure you kind of it sounded like you kind of put actually a deadline for yourself, or of possibly particular targets in your business world, so that you could be that happy mom for your child, and then have a goal in mind to then let it continue to flow. Is that how you focused on it, or did you only still take it day by day and just know you just had to nail it out, chip away at the rock and just keep doing it no matter what?
Yeah, you know what? Unfortunately, I am that typical creative mind where I go with the flow, and my mother's favorite line always resonates with me. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and let's just do it. I wish I was more structured and goal-oriented, and that's something that is a struggle for me, but I'm really trying to get on that bandwagon for sure. But unfortunately, I am a very, let's go with the flow. This is what we need to do today. This is what we need to do this week. And it just has to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Go for the gold. Keep skating hard.
That's it, right? You just got to go until the clock stops ticking.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So how was that adapting period for yourself with the newborn and beginning to run a business? Would there be any insights you could share with our listeners that may be in that same situation or about to be in that same situation?
Yeah. Funny story. My father actually came from Canada to visit us for when Chelsea was born. And he was there. And I remember I had an emergency C-section. So it wasn't the easiest recovery time. It wasn't the greatest birth, but I left hospital, I guess 6 days after she was born. And obviously after a C-section, some moms will know that you have a hard time walking. Like, it's all muscle, you're rebuilding it and such. Well, I had actually had a wedding 2 days later to do. So we were out of the hospital and to the flower market. with a 6-day-old getting flowers to do bouquets for a wedding that I had to deliver the next day. So it's one of those things where you're like, okay, I have to do it. Yeah, my newborn's there. And I think your resilience, I don't think you realize how strong of a person you are until you have a baby that you need to keep alive. You have to feed them, you have to this, but you also have this other part of your life that can't stop. The support of having my father there at the time was great. My husband was great. But I think it's one of those things that it has to get done, so you just do it. You're tired, super tired, but I think the love you have for that child and knowing that you have them, but then the love you have for what you do, it really does combine. And I think it's a natural migration to each other in a way, and you just find a way to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was my experience anyways.
Yeah, no, and that's what all, anything with parents is, right? It's all of our own individual experiences, and everyone's going to be different. Same with birth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so no, it's great to hear a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
So it's really good. What about when that newborn came into your lives? It's great that your dad came over from Canada and you had that additional hands on board. But how have you actually kept your relationship strong with your husband during those testing times? Because obviously, like you said, you've had, didn't have the best birthing experience. So, that obviously affects you physically, emotionally, spiritually, all that stuff. Then you still had to keep powering on because obviously the flower business was still there. Then adjust to the whole newborn, it is everything. And then of course your dad, right? You want to be able to take your dad out and see Australia. Right. So there's strains on there too. But how did you guys keep your relationship strong with you and your husband? Or did you not? Sorry.
No. We did. It's one of those things, and I think it's a tough one because you have a whole new focus, and you forget sometimes that you started out as a couple, and you didn't have this child, but then all of a sudden this child's there, and sometimes you forget about nurturing each other and nurturing your relationship. And that's probably something that maybe where we went wrong a little bit, and we didn't focus on each other. And it's hard. And I mean, obviously we're still together but we have, there's tough times, and then you're running a business, but I think you just have to make that effort, and you have to understand that you're each individuals and you each need something different. And the understanding, with a baby, like with us, I was better with the newborn. My husband wasn't so good with a newborn. Whereas now he's so good with the toddler age, and I find it so stressful because I'm just like, I don't handle it well. The toddler age, she's mouthy and they start getting their opinion. Whereas he's really good with that. So I think knowing where your strengths are and then making sure you have time at the end of the day to spend with each other. Mm-hmm. I think that's where you really have to carve out time. And I'm going to be honest, we didn't do that at the beginning. And that's okay. And it probably has been a little tougher than it needs to be. And you look at, we have some friends who they make sure, they have their kids scheduled down to the T, and they have their whole evenings free to be with each other. And we didn't do that. And you kind of look back and go, you know what, if we had done that, maybe we would have been less stressed. But we just kind of did what that's exactly right. But yeah, what I would say to people who haven't had their child yet is make sure you do carve out that time for each other. Your child, they may be screaming and crying and want you, but they're doing that because they know you're going to go pick them up. You have to make sure you give each other that time and that consideration, and to know that you might be the mother and extra tired, but your husband is also having a tough time realizing that all of a sudden you don't have time for him as much as you used to. So it's that understanding and patience. You need patience, and just love each other through it. Eventually you'll come out the other side.
Yeah, great. Well, I think that's a great leeway into second period. And that's all about getting knocked down, frustrated, and penalties are in full force this period.
Yes.
So, say we're getting frustrated, we're overwhelmed, and we begin to lash out, which tends to happen quite often in hockey. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I'm sure there are events that you wish you could lash out at and possibly, those coordinators that you're working with or your clients,
Yeah.
but you have to keep your cool. How do
sure.
you do that? And do you have like any tips or recommendations of how you keep your cool and get back into that zone to not let that overwhelm or frustration just overtake you?
A body check. No.
Yeah, you can body check the person.
No
That's fine too.
Violence.
No violence. No touching, unfortunately.
No. It's funny. I always realize that when I get frustrated with something, when it comes to the business, or you're dealing with a coordinator or a corporate business person who wants an event, and it's lack of education and them not knowing what's behind it or what's not available. So I find I kind of take a breath. If it's in a meeting or whatever, you just kind of, I tend to make jokes. I'll make a joke to lighten up the situation a bit, and then go at it and try and educate them as to why it can't happen or how we can make it happen through another way. But I find it comes down to lack of education. I don't mean it, just lack of knowledge in the industry. And I think just explaining it and making sure they understand the backstory as to why something can happen or why it can't happen or how we can do it like this, but in a different way, the mechanics behind something. I think that really helps. You're always going to have situations where perhaps you can't work well with somebody. I find it best at the beginning, if you have that feeling, even if you need that gig, sometimes it's better to break the ties and maybe suggest another person who would work well with them than to take on that business. There's been multiple times I've had a bride and I just know that even though the budget's great and I could really use that gig, it would be better for both of us for her to go work with somebody else, because at the end of the day, you want them to be happy, and working with me might not necessarily make her day happy.
Yeah.
And you have to be humble enough in business, I think, to realize that sometimes someone else is better for your customer.
Yeah. And I think the customer, to be honest, too, would appreciate that, and then vice versa, because then you'd appreciate it for yourself too, because you don't just take on someone where you already have that gut feeling or that instinct of, no, this won't work. It's exactly to your gut. Yeah.
And I've had a customer actually refer me to somebody else whose wedding I took on, even though I turned down theirs and passed them on to someone else I knew would work better with them or with their style.
Exactly.
Not everyone can do everything, Not everyone can do everything. And I think that when you realize your limitations are going to affect somebody else's dream or somebody else's business, you need to be able to step back. And I think that comes with time in business, and it comes with learning to not panic too. When you're needing business, you need to go, if the glove fits.
Yeah. And I think it also is about attachment, right? If you're attached always just to the outcome, which could be a financial gain, well, then you're looking at it wrong from the get-go.
100%.
Yeah. So let's take this whole, so you have a perspective or a technique for business where you can cut a joke and, things are fine.
Yep.
But how does that work with your toddler when she's frustrating you and you wish that you could just body check her, but of course you wouldn't do that as a mom.
Right.
No, we would not do that.
No, we do not do that.
No. But what's your technique there? Because obviously if you cut a joke, she's not going to understand it.
You know what's funny is because she has a bit of a sense of humor, so it's very trying, because she'll try and make me laugh if I'm upset.
Oh,
which which is cute, but at the same time she's got a very strong personality. So I find with my daughter, I have to parent differently than my husband has to parent. She listens to my husband. He can just say, "Chelsea, sweetheart, don't do that." And she goes, "Okay, Daddy." Me, I say, Chelsea, please don't do that. And she laughs and continues to do it. Or she'll just run away and scream or throw a tantrum with me. It's taken me a while to realize that me yelling at her and me screaming, it doesn't help. We both get frustrated. I find giving her a cuddle, like a really strong cuddle, works and calms us both down, and then we can take that time apart and chat. But you know, you need time apart, and I swear I am thankful for daycare because she's in there. Even though I work from home and I could have her home, it's good for her and it's good for me to be away from each other, and then you can spend time together when she comes home and you have that great relationship. But there's always going to be issues and anger, and you just have to learn what your child needs discipline-wise. Because I believe every child does need discipline. Sounds harsh, but we're here to teach them right from wrong, danger, no danger. And every child learns differently. Mine, if I were to give her a smack on the bum, it wouldn't work for her from me. It just wouldn't. Whereas taking a toy or just putting her in her room and letting her calm down really does work. So, you know, body checks aside, I think taking a time out is huge.
Yeah,
huge.
Absolutely. And actually, just from another episode, Lee Chapman, he is phenomenal. And
oh, yeah, I love him.
Yeah, he's so brilliant in just relationships. So if you haven't heard that episode, definitely go check it out. But his whole thing is about raising real men. And one of the recommendations he actually talks about is reading the 5 love languages, not only for us as a couple, you know, male and female as a partnership, but there's actually the 5 love languages for kids. And each 100%. Each child is different, like you said, as well. And it's interesting that she has a different game for, you know, dad compared to mom, because kids learn that, right? And they get so quick. So quick.
They are smart.
And the manipulation, I'm just like, nope, I'm not letting you have that, because they are just sometimes just manipulators. So they catch on 100%. Very quick, and they start young.
And you know what? They do right from a baby, and that's why I was saying earlier when making time for each other, and when you put your baby down to sleep and they're screaming, and then you pick them up and they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They just know, if I make this noise, Mommy's gonna come get me. And it's amazing. It's human behavior, and it just is. Like, we all need that affection and that love and that care, and they have dependence on us. But we also need to teach them that, you know, sometimes this is your reason. Obviously not a 1 day old or 6 week old. You still do that. You know what I'm talking about. Yes. But once they're learning it right from them.
Yeah.
All the way up to now, how Chelsea kind of plays us off each other. Oh, yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing how they think.
And they'll still keep going. She's still young. She's
only
4. Yeah.
I'm worried about 16, let me tell you.
Oh, don't worry, just go with the flow. What was the saying with your mom?
We'll cross that bridge when it comes.
That's it. We'll cross that bridge when it comes. So don't stress or think that far.
That's right.
So let's go into third period, because time's running out and the game is nearly over.
Yes.
And this is a really great leeway, because it's actually a question about yourself. Because do you feel you put pressure on yourself about being a great mom, a loving wife, and a successful businesswoman? If so, how do you deal with that? Or you actually don't think of any of that?
Oh, I think absolutely, I think like that. Yeah. And honestly, that's something I've struggled with my entire life. I've always had, and it's something I write about. I think I have a blog up about how I actually got into what I do. And it all stemmed from anxiety and depression and not having a good sense of self. So it's something I've always struggled with. But then, especially when you have a child, you're like, how can I raise this child to know she's wonderful and capable when there's days that I don't even think I'm wonderful and capable, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's a daily struggle, and you know, bless those people who can get through and have this wonderful sense of self, because I think it is super important. But for me, it is a struggle, and you're always, I don't know if it comes from like a right brain, left brain thing, but you have doubt, and you have doubt into, are you able to make this business thrive? Are you able to do that while keeping a marriage intact? Are you able to do that when your child comes home crying and is absolutely devastated because something, it's, I don't know, it's not one of those things that it's something I need to be more conscious about. And it's something I've just recently joined an 8-week challenge to get myself back, to be healthier and fitter and get my mind back on track, because I feel like that is something that when you're a parent, you lose a bit of yourself in that, and you live your life for your child. Whereas that's really, I don't want this to sound bad, but that's not good for anybody, because you are still you, and you still need to fill yourself with the self-love and keep yourself happy, or your child's not going to be happy. So, and I think there's a lot of people out there right now who struggle with that. There's a lot of stresses in life. There's a lot of anxiety in life. And I think it's important for people to realize they're not the only ones that go through that. And you need to find that support from people who can give you that lift up when you can't do it yourself.
Absolutely, because honestly, Heather, I just want to touch on, and for those listeners who haven't watched the Who's the Host episode, if you haven't heard or not, that is why I've created this podcast. Because literally I became unexpectedly pregnant in October 2017. And from that moment, I literally had people and friends say to me, oh, I guess you can't go travel with Tony Robbins now, because Mick and I were planning on doing Platinum Partners in March. And I was just kind of shocked. I was like, what do you mean that we can't do Platinum Partners? And they're like, well, because you're pregnant. It's like, yeah, but we can do it maybe later on, not when we actually originally planned, but we can still do it. They're like, no, you can't. You're going to have a baby then. Sure. You can't travel around the world with a baby. And it's like, yes, we can. And it was just really actually saddened me, because there were so many statements that I realized so many people just stop living their life because of something. It doesn't have to be pregnancy. It doesn't have to be parenthood. It could be a loss of a loved one. If anything, it could have been any hurdle, but you just lose sight of that. And absolutely, that's one thing that actually, of course, Mick and I were open. We're new parents to be. It hasn't happened yet. We're to do very soon. But our mindset is just so solid, because we have so much personal development and growth that we've done, that our communication levels, we know it's going to change, and it's going to be, a day-by-day process, especially when the newborn comes, but we're open to it. And literally the self-love, what you're talking about, I am a really firm believer is that you have to, as parents and individuals, you have to love yourself first before you can love someone else. And then the baby or the child or the toddler or the teenager, whomever, is going to learn that from home. And if you don't love yourself, then unfortunately, where else is your child going to learn that? And honestly, I grew up with not knowing what self-love was. I had to go on a journey when I was 20. I had to have stuff happen to me for me to wake up, but I'm so grateful because, now I've had that for the last 12 years, and I'm so confident in it, that I can now pass that on. Yeah, because it's really crucial, because our kids aren't going to listen to us based on what we tell them. They're going to listen to what we show them.
That's right.
And
that's right.
It really is our responsibility, which is why this whole podcast has come about, so that we can have experts like yourself and other experts come on board to share their expertise on how they are still living their life and making things happen despite being a parent, but also being a huge role model and leaving that legacy behind for their children, because we are the ones, and we have to take ownership.
That's right.
That. So absolutely. So that's fantastic that you're taking that ownership, Heather, and actually stepping up your game and going on that 8-week challenge, because you know what? You can start at any time. It doesn't have to be all because, I don't know how to love myself now. It will never be like that. It's like, no.
Right.
Stop it from today. Draw that line in the sand and make it happen. And like you said, knowing your weaknesses or your strengths, and knowing that for your partner as well, and be able to communicate that, that's huge.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things, I always joke that I'm too old for a 4-year-old. I just turned 40, and I just feel like, and I have a sister-in-law who has teenagers, and she's a year younger than me, and her youngest, I think, is like 14. And you look at that and you compare each other. But then I compare myself. I said, if I had done this 10 years younger, I would have been a completely different person. I learned probably, 10, 15 years ago, I went through a lot of stuff that I think if I didn't go through, I wouldn't have been a capable parent, a capable business person, a capable wife that I am today.
Absolutely.
And, I think for people going through crap right now, it's hard to look at and say there's a purpose for this. Maybe there isn't a purpose for it, but take what you're going through. And when you get through it, look at it and go, you know what, my experience, it may not have benefited my life in a huge way or helped me in any way, but can I use this to help other people? Can I use this to help my child? Because our children are going to go through so many more stresses than maybe we can't even imagine. I mean, their jobs are going to be probably not even created, your child and my child's job right now. They're going to have so many stresses that we can't even understand. And is what I went through 10, 15 years ago in any way going to help Chelsea be able to get through stuff? Yeah, I believe it will. And I believe that that's what I'm going to use that lesson for.
Oh, yeah. And it will, honestly, Heather, because everyone comes at parenting different times. I'm so grateful, to be honest. We waited this long, and to be honest, it wasn't
100%.
planned. But I'm so grateful. I couldn't imagine having a kid, 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I just, like you said, I wouldn't be a good mom. I wouldn't be a good wife. I wouldn't, I needed that time for me to grow up.
That's right.
I feel like everyone's on their own journey. And if you had a young child too, that's still super as well, because that was meant to be for you. And
that's right.
Everyone's on their own different journey at different times. And that's what makes life so amazing and why individuals are so superb. Because we all have our own uniqueness. So, no, I love that. So just going back into the third period, because the game's nearly done. And this is when we find most players tend to put more pressure on themselves, especially in the last period, right? The countdown's happening.
Yep.
This is the final bit, especially we're in playoffs, right? There's a lot of pressure. So, is there any advice or tips you'd like to share with our audience to remember to have fun and enjoy the ride along the way? Because I love how you break tension with jokes. And that is a skill, it really is, because I admire it. So please let me know if you have
some would
any.
debate that.
I'm sure at times. I'm sure there's times where you make a joke when it may not be the best time, but
like
overall,
inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's important. I personally think it's important to keep a sense of humor. I couldn't do what I do or be who I am, and I wouldn't have got to this point in my life without a sense of humor. I was raised in a family who has a crazy sense of humor. And I have a child with a sense of humor. So I find when things get super stressful, I find being silly really helps. And that might not work for some people, but I just need to be able to laugh and joke and really look at it and go, oh my goodness, could things get any crazier? And just look at the funny side of it. Because if I can't see the funny side of it, for me, why am I doing it? If I'm not having fun, why am I doing it? And if I'm just going to be so stressed out all the time, it's funny. My husband's sitting here and he just rolled his eyes a bit at me because he's like, no, you get stressed.
Oh, that's the given. There's still stress there, but you enjoy yourself and and it helps you let go as well.
Yeah. You have to, because I mean, if you're going to sit back and just, don't get me wrong. There are days when I sit here and you cry and you're just like, what am I going to do? Because you're so stressed and you need that release. And sometimes you just need to sit down and cry about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if then you can pull yourself out of that funk and laugh about it or look at the wonderful side of it. Like, I mean, God, I get to play with flowers and look at beautiful things all day. I mean, it puts you back into that headspace. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my favorite thing to do is just go wander around the flower market and just smell the flowers. And I would recommend anyone in Brisbane can do that. You can go walk into the Brisbane flower market and just walk into the coolers and look at them and smell. And it's just so nice. Mm-hmm. It makes you happy. And that to me is the best. If I can do what I love and make people happy at the same time, the stress is there, but I still feel great about it.
Yeah, it
and
makes
I
it
still
worth
feel
it.
like it's my calling.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great to hear. And that just allows, for any partners that might be listening, if their girlfriend or wife might be breaking down and just crying, it's a good thing. We do need to release our emotions sometimes.
We need to cry.
Yeah,
That's right.
it is a release for us. So
Yep.
don't feel overwhelmed by it or anything. And guys will take it out in other ways too, right? They might
That's
do
right.
it in silence and go off and do their own hobby or whatever that might be. And for ladies who are listening, let them go, right? They need that
Yep.
space too, right? So we have
That's
to
right.
respect each other in that sense too.
That's right.
Amazing. Yep. So Heather, I'm going to wrap up today's game, but is there anything else you'd like to add before we close off?
No, I just like to say, I mean, Amber, this is a great thing because there's so many people who are coming from different walks of life who will resonate with different people who do this podcast. I mean, there are a lot of people who are kind of I call them the smart people. I'm a creative mind. I do creative things, and it's good to hear from the different minds that are out there and how they handle things. Everyone has different life experiences, and the more we can hear about everybody's, we can just take little tips from that, and everyone can live their best life and do the best for their children and their families. And I just think it's great.
Oh, thanks so much. And you definitely are smart, so don't say that. You might be creative as well. That could be a stronger suit, but you are definitely intelligent, so don't think that.
That's what I was, intelligence, different intelligence, or, what was I going to say? Scholarly.
Oh,
scholarly
beautiful.
Was more the word I was looking for.
I wouldn't have come up with that myself, so.
It's good, right? Scholarly.
Very good, very good. I probably won't even attempt to pronounce it because my speech impediment will kick it off.
There you go.
But thank you so much for being on our show, Heather. How can people get in touch with you if they want to book you for services? How can they, if they have a wedding coming up or corporate gigs, how can they get to work with you?
You can definitely, I've got a website, so it's www.chelseaandrose.com.au. So you can email me. My phone number's on there. You can call me. I've got Instagram. I'm based out of Southport, but I do service all of Brisbane. I also do interstate as well. So if you're looking at doing interstate tours or book launches or something, I do that as well. So and I'd also like to put out there, anyone listening to the podcast, if you do want a service, I just mention the podcast on here and you'll get 15% off my services across the board. So
amazing.
That's floral arrangement, wedding, or corporate.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. And I'll add all those details and the links into the show notes as well, so you guys can just click on it and go right to and book it in. So
excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Once again, you are amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us on our show today. So thank you
so much, Amber.
No problem. And thank you so much, listeners, for listening to today's episode. We truly appreciate and love you all. If you've enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, or follow us on your chosen platform. And of course, share with anyone you could see benefiting from it from today. For those who are brand new listening to our show, you can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify, and we'll be releasing our next episode every single Monday. Look forward to having you tune in then, and thanks again, guys, and have a wonderful week. Bye!